Hi, and welcome back to another episode of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed. And this one's different. I'm going to be very honest. This is going to be different. This is going to be talking about a subject that I've commented on the past. I met you, Simon, and I had the same conversation. But the more I listen and the more I learn, it creates a better understanding. And we're going to talk about the noise about what you're going to be talking about today as well. So welcome to If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed, the Mind Management Mentors podcast. I'm your host, Cudworth, and today is all about living with mental. How do you want to describe it, Simon?
Maybe mental wealth.
Mental wealth?
Hmm.
Not a mental illness, not mental health. You want to call it mental wealth.
Mental wealth. Yeah, I think that's just came to me as you were just saying mental, because there's still quite a bit of stigma around mental health in general. And that is changing, that needle is moving.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a long way to go. And I think that although people are much more open, particularly men, with things like Andy's Man Club, for example, where there's fellowship between men, and even XCC that I'm obviously you're aware of.
Mm.
Just finding those places, particularly for men. Obviously, I can only really speak from a male perspective, being a guy myself. It's just for a long time. I think people have really struggled to talk about it,
Mm.
either share concerns that they have it, or when they have it, how do they manage those conversations, manage life, do things. But in my experience, through all the work that I've done since being diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder, used to be known as manic depression. And essentially, that's a kind of mood and energy fluctuation, a lot more than the usual person would have, so to speak. And I've been on this journey since November 2017 when I had a psychotic episode in Miami. I was hospitalized for 11 days. And from that point up till pretty much the week just gone, I've been on quite a significant journey in terms of trying to figure out how to manage that. Manage that as a dad. Got a son called Josh who's 10, who's beautiful. Manage my career. Like I've had to totally rejig what I'm doing. Family, friends, everything, every sphere of my life has been affected by that. And obviously, it was a milestone when I was diagnosed by Dr. Jane Cheeseman at the Royal. And yeah, I'm just really pleased. I'm really pleased to be alive because I did have suicidal ideation, but I've never acted upon it. And again, on our kind of prep call, I was saying that what's central to me, my North Star is my faith. So I'm a Christian, was brought up a Christian, had a time away from the church, was a little bit naughty, do, doing what you do. But I've always, whenever I've got myself into a spot of bother, which I'm sure we all have at some point, I've always looked to Jesus and looked to God ultimately and the Holy Spirit, because there's the Trinity there to help me navigate my way back to Him, essentially.
Beautiful. All that before actually introducing myself. So it's
I mean, to find out, you just go to Simon Bergenroth on LinkedIn. You'll find, yeah, all you need to know about me in a professional sense.
so we have Simon Bergenroth on the podcast. Thank you very much for introducing yourself. And the reason we're having this conversation, and I want to set this conversation up appropriately, because when I said somebody introduced you to me, so I'm a mind management coach, and I never diagnose, I never subscribe, never say this is what's wrong with you. I'm solution focused. So if somebody comes to Cuddy, they went, "Oh, I just need to manage my minds. I'm lacking confidence. I've got anxiety. I'm depressed, um, and I want to move forward in life. However, that movement and journey is, we construct it together without a diagnosis and without the challenges that we have. I have a bias, and I want to put that, which is why we're having the chat. It does not in any way say that my bias is correct. The studies and understanding that I have, and I will say this now, this is not to trigger, this is to have the conversation that we're going to have the conversation about, Simon. and it's a powerful adult conversation, is I'm fully aware that 96% of most bipolar diagnoses are incorrect. That does not in any way state that your diagnosis is incorrect in any way whatsoever. But I want there to be open and transparency for the podcast, that I know I have a narrative and a bias, and I'm constantly wanting to learn, is that correct? Because we can get into that position where I'm right and everyone else is wrong, and that's bullshit. But what struck me in the chat that we had about these conversations is how and why you are where you are, and you have found peace. And that's the important part. You found your solution.
Yeah.
In the world of mental health and mindset, and people saying, do this and do that, this is the solution. It must be really noisy without the internal chatter and the conversations and the psychotic episode that you had. It must be really exhausting for somebody who's found out that they might have bipolar, and then what's next?
Yeah.
Because if you Google that, like we talked about, mushrooms will come up. Don't take depression. Don't take tablets. Don't do this. You know, look for the holistic way. Look for changing your identity. Look for resolving the trauma. Clearly, there's been trauma in your life and it's triggered something. And for anybody who's just come out of the doctors or the hospital after an episode, and it's like it can genuinely be a massive impact for people going, what the fuck do I do in my life now?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what today's conversation is about.
Okay.
Is Simon Bergenroth, executive career progression coach, mentor, advisor, living with what you live with, the journey that you've been on from childhood, drugs, which is a very common. I did drugs. I went through. I never went through a genuinely horrible rough time, but I took drugs for fun and did things as all scallywags do. You know, there's got to be that open and transparency. But Simon, your story genuinely is fascinating, and how you are sat here, especially with faith, which is important for people. The medications that you're on, and how you're living your life on your terms now. You can literally say, I'm living it on my terms. And
I'm peaceful. The word is peaceful. I'm peaceful. Finally, I'm peaceful. Finally.
And that just must feel like the world off the shoulders kind of moment for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders.
And that's today's conversation.
Yeah.
So Simon, let's talk about the dark first. I think there's a tipping point for everyone.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the dark. We need to talk about, if you're comfortable, I know you said you were anyway, about the psychotic episode. You told me what your psychotic episode was, and I was like, is that not just stress? But I know, I'm like, that doesn't seem that psychotic. That was my perspective of it. Doesn't mean to say I'm right. But I was like, if you've got all that going on in your life, if you're juggling that amount of plates, you're going to drop some of your plates.
Yeah.
So you identified it as a psychotic episode, and that's what we're going to talk about. So do you know what? I'm going to shut the fuck up. Simon.
So this starts with the employer that I was with at that time, which I won't name because, there's no point. It's in the past. But I was in a situation where there was a very toxic, almost like a bullying culture. And I was a bit of a whistleblower, kind of calling things out in terms of how things could be improved. And I kind of tried to do that through direct line management, then department line management or department head. Then I went to the top of the person at the time that was running the marketing department, and they'd always said to me, well, the door's always open before you leave. And I was in that mindset. I was like, I'm working for this organization that should have been the best job I ever did, but it just wasn't. And then when I shared, even with a email that said private and confidential, when I shared that, they shared it with my line manager, the department head, and also someone in HR. So that was the beginning of the end. Fast forward a couple of weeks, or I can't even remember the timeline, but I was put on a PIP, performance improvement plan, and it was wholly unfair because I just kept on putting more and more work into it. There was no way that I was ever going to achieve what I'd been laid out in front of me. So for me and my faith, it was kind of like Peter stepping out the boat. And I was like, okay, I've never been in a situation where I have left a role without having one to go to. I had a reasonably successful career, doing various things, mainly in marketing, both client side and agency side. And yeah, I handed in my notice, and I was relieved, and I was delighted. And then they said, "Oh, well, there's a conference happening in Miami. Would you like? Could you go with the new line manager? Because the previous one left conveniently. So I was a bit like, this is a bit strange. I'm working notice, and they want me to go overseas to deal with, clients and stakeholders. So I agreed to that, and then flew out to Miami for the conference. And hadn't slept the night before I traveled. I didn't sleep the whole day of travel, and subsequent days I was only having 1, maybe 2 hours of sleep. So heavy sleep deprivation, obviously all the stress and tension that had come from the work situation. My work bag was stolen out of an Uber. Couldn't get in contact with them. I'd left it in there, couldn't get in contact. I had my work laptop and some personal things. So that was another stressor that was there. And yeah, like, I suppose the short story is that my behavior was off. Like some of the things that I was talking about or thinking was just not of me, in a sound frame of mind. So the decision was made to, oh, actually, one last thing. I was in the hotel lobby of a hotel nearby where I was staying in Fort Lauderdale, and a gang fight broke out, and someone got an assault rifle out, and I was only about 10 foot away. So for me, all I did was get on the floor and pray, and I was fine. There was no shots fired, but all these pressures and all these stresses. So when I got to hospital and they hooked me up to a blood pressure machine, it was over 200. So I was in a critical, like what was going on mentally was affecting me physically, spiritually, emotionally, all of that kind of stuff. So they said, right, you're going to come this way. Went through to accident emergency. They gave me some medication to kind of calm me down. That was obviously a good thing. And then the decision was made to get me home as soon as possible. But on a visit where I had to get a fitness to fly certificate from a doctor, I remember just being in the waiting room and getting that. Well, it's the last suicidal thought I've had since this occasion, thankfully. And the thought went through my head: your destiny is to kill yourself like your dad did. And my dad passed away, took his own life in 31st of October 2008. So my brother has bipolar, I have bipolar. Dad certainly had something on that mental health, wealth, whatever you want to call it, spectrum. But for whatever reason, he made that decision that he was going to do that. So again, back to my faith, that was not from God. God is all about love, and yeah, and very much light, opposite to the dark that we're talking about now. So for about 10 seconds, I truly believed that that was right, and then it just obviously spooked me. And I said to my line manager at the time, I said, right, I just need to stay close to you. And obviously that was really worrying for her. So they got me on Virgin Upper Class on the way back home. So I managed to get some sleep and had one of those flat beds. So I got basically royalty treatment all the way back to Edinburgh. And then my ex-wife and her father were waiting for me at the airport. And there was a kind of airport security just in case, anything happened, or again, I just wasn't in the right headspace. So from there, I agreed that we'd go to the Royal, where they have something called the Mental Health Assessment Service. Went there, was very much almost like a court, a court of session, two people behind a massive desk, and they were asking me questions about what happened and various things, and I was like, oh, I'm fine, I'm doing okay. But yeah, I was symptomatic really of being in a manic mode because I was hallucinating, suicidal thoughts, all the different things. And as a mood scale, I was very much 9 or 10 on that mood scale, which is obviously quite dangerous. So I quite reluctantly, but I didn't get sectioned. I went in voluntarily, and I said, okay, let's see if you can straighten me out and make some sense of it. So I was in the Balcarres ward of the Royal for 11 days, and that's where obviously they started to medicate me. It was amazing actually. I call them God incidences, where that wing of that psychiatric unit had only been opened 2 weeks before by Nicola Sturgeon. So I managed to get a single room rather than it being a communal ward, which again can have its own stresses and obviously a lot going on. But I learned a lot about myself in that time, while I was obviously in the unit. And then, after that, when you get home, they get the in-home treatment team, IHTT, community psychiatric nurse, lots of support every day. With bipolar, if you have a really big manic episode and it's high, you tend to burn out, even though you feel like you're invincible, you're super creative, all these different things, grandiose ideas. Again, all the symptomatic stuff of having bipolar affective disorder, and yeah, so that was the what happened next was a deep depression for about 6, 7 months. And yeah, after I'd kind of leveled out a little bit, I was like, right, well, I want to get back to work, I want to get on with my life. Obviously I was on the beginning of my journey of managing the condition because it's a chronic condition. You can't cure bipolar. All you can do is manage it with the various things that, obviously you've mentioned about medication, lifestyle, all of that, talking therapies, different ways that you can do it. And so yeah, so I took a job that was the same level kind of in pay and responsibility as I had before, but that didn't last probation basically. They said it wasn't a good fit and I agreed. So I left there and I was like, okay, I just want to do something. I want to rebuild, I call it the kind of God reset moment in my life where I just called up the first temp agency and they said, we've got a role, it's on the phones, working in council tax at the Edinburgh City Council. And I said, that's great, because that was actually when my career started in my deferred year before I went to university. And I learned all about telemarketing and how to use the phone. And again, I did a whole week worth of training, which I still use now in my business, objection handling, tone, breathing, all these different things. And it was like, right, we're going to put you on the shop floor and we're going to move you through. So they were excellent. I mean, that again, it's going to be, there's a lot of heat on councils. But all I can say is internally, in terms of how they managed me, they were magnificent, absolutely magnificent. And the guy that hired me looked at my CV and said, "Do you really want to be there? Do you want to do the job? Like you're so overqualified." And I said, "I just need to build my confidence." And they were just brilliant. And I'm actually now career coaching my line manager back then, and I'm doing it pro bono because she was so kind to me. And she's like, "I need to pay you." I said, "No, this is pro bono. You were supportive when I needed it, and I'm here now for you." So I got a sort of full-time position from temp, and then I moved to another department. But it was always going to be short term, always going to be short term. I needed to think about what the future was going to hold for me. So there was a mentor of mine who I'd worked with since I moved to Edinburgh in 2013. I was working for a company called the Lane Agency. And yeah, I was introduced to this mentor, and she's always kind of been in my life and always had very good guidance. So we did a bit of a career audit, looked at the things that, I was good at, thinking about, okay, finding yourself in a position where you're not under pressure and all those things that you need to stay away from in terms of triggering, either a manic or a depressive episode. And she suggested leadership and executive coaching. And I was like, okay, I've had a little bit of that when I first came to Scotland because I found living and working up here quite different to having family connections and a few friends. So the culture is very different in Scotland than it is in England. So I had a bit of that and I thought, do you know what? I've always loved encouraging people. I've always had the natural ability to network and get on with pretty much anyone that's put in front of me, whether that's shop floor, associate level, all the way up to CEO, which is where I work now. I tend to work with people on board level, C-suite, or that level just below that people want to move into that board position. So I was like, great, okay, let's put some money down. Let's get a qualification. So I got an ILM 7 coaching and mentoring qualification. Started up Simon Bergenroth executive coaching. Not very exciting, but it was a start, and I did that as a side hustle while I was still at the council. And then I got back 3 or 4 months later, I got headhunted by the company I was working for. And they said, right, you qualified, you're a shining light. We'd really like you to have you part of the team. So did that for about 18 months, 2 years. And then on the May, this was 2022, and the May, they gave me a pay rise. And then in the June, within 3 days, they'd made me redundant for,
Mm.
for cost cutting exercise. So that was interesting. So it was pretty soon after. Obviously, a bit of a shock to the system. I'd never been made redundant before, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I've always wanted to have my own company, and a company where I could work anywhere in the world that had a laptop, a device, and an internet connection. And that's where Three Hats was born. So Three Hats is coaching, mentoring, and advising. I work, mainly with executives, but there are other people as well, like my line manager that I mentioned, that I do a bit of pro bono and give something back. But yeah, this month I'm 3 years old. I've made profit every single year I've been trading. I actually do through an associate network. I've got a couple of contracts, and I do a lot of what's known as outplacement redundancy coaching.
Yeah,
And
that makes total sense.
yeah, and to do that, having been through that and built the wisdom and the experience and the knowledge, and I suppose this point is all about lived experience, lived experience of bipolar, lived experience of life, in the light and the dark and all things in between. It's all led me up to kind of where I am at the moment. So that's running great guns. Again, you'll find that on LinkedIn. So Simon, I'll just spell out my surname: Bergenroth. You put that into Google or LinkedIn, you can get a kind of background. So yeah, so that's really what's led me up to this point, and to a moment in time where last week I had my latest psychiatric evaluation and discussion with my doctor, who's actually a doctor that I've known all the way since the hospital. So he was there at the time, and he said, "You're doing fantastic," and we've actually got to a medication combination that works really, really well for me. And I've been, trying all sorts of different medications for various side effect reasons and things, which I won't go into because they're quite personal. But again, I've been moving around. But actually, I've got to a point where I'm like, I'm going to trust the professionals here. And I think we kind of alluded to it before, that there's a lot of voices around mental health about the way to tackle it and manage it. And I've had the voices in terms of the doctors, psychiatrists, psychotherapists. I've also got a heart condition called atrial fibrillation, so I've got a heart doctor as well, and I've got GPs. I've basically got the full deck of cards to keep me well. And then there's another group, which is very broad, and I've had this an awful lot over the last kind of 8 years or so since diagnosis, that they would say you don't need any pharmaceuticals, that you can have mushrooms, or you can have alternative remedies, or even, I hope this doesn't sound rude, but even your stat there about 96% of people misdiagnosed. And I've tried it without medication. I've tried to come off. I've gone cold turkey twice, and it didn't work out well, is all I can say. Um, and the most important thing for me is my son and being well for him. And the hardest part of being in that unit within the Royal was that I couldn't see my son. I mean, we've got an incredible bond, and he's my world, as is my family, friends, connections, all sorts of people. I've got a lot of love to give, right? And I sense that about you, Cuddy, as well. Very, very warm reception when we met, and an engaging contact there. So for me, it's all about well. But I've had all sorts of things in terms of websites that you can look up, different medications, and there's people that have put side effects and different things. Again, people that have said, oh, herbal remedies, or all these various things. And again, I'm sure your viewers will be aware of all those. But for me personally,
Yeah.
I've chosen the route to follow the kind of professionals with regards to medication. So I do talking therapies, I do medication, I do health and well-being in terms of I exercise regularly. Olanzapine, which is one of my main medications, which is a kind of antipsychotic. that has a side effect of weight gain because of increased appetite. But I've since April, March this year, I've lost just over 10 kilos. And I was talking to my doctor today, and he said that's miraculous because it's known as one of those medications where you've got more appetite, so you drink and eat more and all the rest of it. So I was 130 kilos, and my fighting weight that I'm aiming for is 100 kilos. So I'm well on the way to that. I'm a third of the way, just over a third of the way. And again, yeah, for me, it's all of those doctors and various professionals as well as my faith. It's not just one or the other.
Yeah.
I wouldn't subscribe to say, well, because you have a faith and you're a Christian, well, God can just heal you. Yes, he can. He does do that, but he doesn't do that all the time. And I'm, a mere morsel, so I can't comprehend what's going through his head. But for me, it's that combination of my faith and the professionals coming together to, as I said, bring me to a place of peace.
And that's a beautiful part. I was going to ask actually, because there's so much to deep dive there, but the three hats, do you think that's got anything to do with the Holy Trinity?
Could be.
I
The power,
wondered.
the power of three. Could
Yeah,
be.
absolutely.
Holy Spirit, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, I know it says coaching, mentor, and advisor, but I wonder if he's actually kind of thought about the Holy Trinity as he talks so passionately about.
Well, I was painting someone's friend of mine that goes to the church that I belong to called Sanctuary in South Queensferry and Dalmeny, and she just needed a bit of help to paint some doors. So I was kind of doing that, and it was great fun to do it. Nice to kind of bless her and just do something for her and help her. And she's a good friend. And I looked out the window and I saw there was a board that said Trinity on it yesterday. So, yeah, the fact that you brought it up today, it's a bit like, okay, is that another God incidence? Is it? Because
We
I don't believe in coincidence.
No, and we can create meaning and whatever we want to choose to look for in life, we can see, right? I
Yeah.
love that. So, and the reason when we had the chat and you said, well, I had a psychotic incident, and the reason I listened to the story, I'm like, that doesn't like sound to me. If I've not had sleep for a couple of nights, I know I'll tell everybody the best antidepressant is sleep.
Yeah.
Just to everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, could I only sleep 3 hours a night? Do whatever you need to do to get a good 6, 7, 8 hours sleep. Whatever you need to do. The sleep is the best antidepressant. But I was like, well, you're pissed off with work. They've asked you when you're on sign off, oh, can you go to Miami and look after someone else? When you're probably going to be going, what the hell do I want to care about this? For God's sake, I'm leaving. But you've gone and done it. Then you're in Fort Lauderdale. I know Fort Lauderdale really well, so I sailed out of there. Was it down by the Ross on Fort Lauderdale?
Well, at night I could see all the cruise liners going out from the docks.
So then there's been a gang. Someone's pulled out a gun. You've gone on the floor. That to me does not sound like a psychotic episode. That sounds like you've just gone through hell, and you've managed it really, really well. I know that the outcomes wasn't what you, but I'm like, would not anybody with or without bipolar? Kind of sounds like you managed it really well, Simon.
Well, I had good people. I mean, the lady that I was with is, I kind of see her as my guardian angel because she kind of just sort of held the space for me and just got me back to my son's mum and her dad, and then obviously I could get the treatment that I needed to figure out what's going on.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing that story. It's a passionate story. It's a big story that people need to understand, and especially the outcomes you have now that you're on the medication and you've found peace. And that must be absolutely blissful that you're into that place. So, Simon, I congratulate you on that. However, I think however anybody finds their peace, whether it's with medication, without medication, or however it is, just finding peace can be so beneficial for anyone. So I wanted to ask a question for anyone that there was a point when you weren't diagnosed as bipolar. So when you were working at that big business that you don't want to name, which is perfectly fine. What was he called again? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Simon.
Oh, nice try.
So when you were giving constructive feedback, how was that? Because I know that people get like that. They're like, well, I've got some feedback for the business so we can change those things, but things are not getting changed, right? So you went to your line manager, then you went da, 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 and then it got to the point with, look, what were you giving formative feedback for? Am I allowed to ask that?
What do you mean by formative feedback?
When you were clearly had a problem at the place of work and you wanted to
Yeah.
give feedback so that people could change because you said it was kind of like a toxic nature. I'm going to be. I think whistleblower is a harsh term, but that's the term you picked. But it doesn't sound like you're whistleblowing. You were like, look, there's a problem. We can resolve it, and then we can get this business going even better.
Well,
But it
I
wasn't
wasn't
heard
getting,
like that.
well, I wasn't getting any support. That was the challenge. I
Right.
just wasn't getting support, and people weren't seeing, because I think in any job it's difficult to be good at everything, right?
Correct.
And there was things that I found more challenging, because it was a strategic role, and strategy is not easy to get right. But there was an awful lot of things that I did well and really enjoyed, and I think on the basis that they said even though I was leaving, that they wanted me to go out to Miami. Why would they do that? Because they knew I had some very, very good, strong connections that I'd built since I started working with them. So yeah, funny that they recognize that, but nothing else.
Okay. So that's. I just wanted to know that if somebody's going through that similar thing, you were looking for support on a part of your job that you weren't maybe as comfortable with. And that's
Yeah,
kind of, again, it's another sign of a comfortable person that says, look, I'm not good in this area. What do I need to do to get? And then the people above are kind of like, well, no, we're not going to give you the support. The door's over there if you don't like it, kind of thing, right?
yeah,
Perfect. So for anyone that there, you kind of knew that it wasn't for you. You felt really good. You handed in your notice. Boom, you were leaving, and you kind of you made that difference. You
yeah.
also had the undercurrent going on in the background. You had a personal thing going on in your background, which was divorce and dad's unfortunate instance. So they were going on in the background. So was that clouding the
Well,
need?
that no, I mean the end of my marriage was later than that. So that happened after. Yes, yes. So it was after that.
Right.
I'm just trying to
So
work out the timeline in my head.
yeah, no, 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 it's absolutely fine because I know that you've got these personal things going on in your life, and then we bring that to work, and we're like, I'm kind of struggling, but I'm struggling with strategy. Was it the strategy we were struggling with, or
Yeah.
was it was kind of like now for you? I'm guessing it's going to be all I was kind of struggling with the hypermania, the highs and the lows of bipolar because I didn't know what was going on.
Well, one of the main reasons I left my previous employer before moving to this organization that I've kind of alluded to was that Josh came along. And I wanted to, I didn't want to be an absent father. I wanted to be there from the start and support his mum. And just, yeah, just, kids are just an incredible blessing. And when we knew that his mum was pregnant, that changed everything for me. So I was working in a role that I really enjoyed, but I was in an industry where it's work hard, play hard. It can be long hours, all the rest of it. I thought, right, I'm going to move intentionally just so I can kind of leave on time, get home, put the boy in the bath, read him a story, be there for those moments. So that was the precursor to it.
Beautiful, fantastic. So, Christian faith, when you are going through the hypermania, the Miami, what were you saying to God?
I suppose the easiest way of putting that into context was that it was spiritual warfare.
Yeah,
And there were light and dark forces. And again, we don't need to go into those. Everyone has their own view of what that is. But I was in an incredibly vulnerable place.
yeah,
And it might have ended really badly had I not had support of my kind of line manager. That they didn't take me to, if they had not said, right, we need to take you to hospital, none of it would have got picked up. And I could have had a stroke, a brain bleed, heart attack. All of these different things could have happened. But just at the moments I needed it most, God showed up. And there's a great story. I think it was of the evening after I'd started to chill out a bit. I had a bit of medication just to kind of bring everything down as it needed to. We got in a taxi, and the taxi driver, who I'd never met before in my life, literally just turned around to me and said, "You're still with us then?" And my line manager's face just went white. She was like, "How? What is that all about?" And yeah, I said, "Yeah, I'm still here." And yeah, I've always had that sense, through the Holy Spirit and just that warmth of love that God sort of, meters out on those people that are willing to accept it. It was just, yeah, it was, yeah, it as much as it sounds, well, it is incredibly, has been incredibly traumatic. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah.
So it was a gift, which is strange to say given all of those things, but it was a gift.
Yeah. That's literally how we get back into the Thrive mind. Yeah. It's the questions that we ask. Yeah. Wow. So, Simon, now you literally have lived experience. You are a lived experience. Even the choices that you've made with how you want to manage the is it BPD bipolar? Is it BPD or is that a different? Somebody commented on one of my podcasts and had said that BPD was misdiagnosed and they went actually BPD and bipolar is two different things. And
Well,
I
it's
was
bipolar affective disorder, so it's BAD.
right, there we go. You see, so
It's
bad.
yeah.
It's bad, is what it is. Yeah, fantastic. You're not going to forget that acronym. Yeah, yeah. No, look, thank you so much for sharing. So now we head towards. we head towards. I'm laughing because my wife just come in to get the dog out so she can take her for a walk. Fantastic. So, the thing we're going to talk about now is we've talked about the dog. However, now we are going to talk about your life and how you coach and mentor others, and that's the most important part of the story because you've lived the bad experience, excuse the pun, the tipping point. Now it's like this is how I help with coaching, mentoring, and advising. So, who comes to see you, Simon?
So I'd mentioned before about some associate contracts that I have with a few companies. So that's all outplacement. And actually, that takes up currently the lion's share of my coaching time. So I've a large caseload of people that come from some very, very big blue chip companies, but there is because of economic conditions, etc., AI, all these different things, there are people literally being shed in their thousands that are losing their jobs. So that has been an increasingly big part of what I do through Three Hats as an associate working on behalf of other companies. In my direct Three Hats business, alluded to earlier, I'm really interested in that board level, that level just below, whether that's senior VP, director, heads of, up to that C-suite, non-exec director, board advisor. And that gets the nub of my why. Why do I work with those individuals? Well, I've got most experience. So that first kind of proper coaching job was all people at board C-suite, wanted to be non-exec directors, etc. So that gave me a huge wealth of experience. But the most important thing for me is that if I can affect change on a board, help someone move into a position or improve their effectiveness around that board table, that has a cascading effect across the whole organization. And that's the real power. And that's what I believe God has called me to do, to have significant influence at a very senior level. And it's playing out, it's manifesting itself. So yeah, I've got clients that I'm working with at the moment that want to make that move up to chief exec, non-exec directors, career transition, boardroom effectiveness, a whole range of different things. But yeah, it's focused around the very kind of senior top level of an organization. And again, I work with private, public, and third sector organizations.
Yeah, perfect. So when you're coaching people, I always think there's like a blueprint for coaching. And I think a powerful blueprint is identity, beliefs, and even I forgot what the other things. But what's some of the things that you're kind of identity's got to play a big part when someone's lost their job? How do you help coach identity? I think identity is one of the strongest, powerful forces that we have in life. Either create an identity we want to move into or understanding the identity that we are to get us there. So is that a good question to ask you? How do you manage identity? And do you find that pops up a lot with people?
I think it pops up with everyone, particularly when you're losing your job, because for a lot of people, their work is a part of their identity,
Yes.
and particularly for, again, that rung below and up to board level. Yeah, these are kind of champions of industry, and they've either organically moved into those roles or they've been successful because they've moved elsewhere, perhaps. And a lot of people find that. And I say, we can coach you in your existing role to get a better salary, more responsibility, all the rest of it. But the lion's share of people are like, well, I'm stuck in my career. There's no way to me to move up. There's people that are entrenched and all that, so they're looking for something else. And another little mantra that I use is understanding is everything. So I do use psychometric evaluation. So I work with a company called Thomas International. They've got various kind of assessments that you can do. And I use things like disc profiling, dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance, looking at kind of behaviors, of, if I was coaching you, like your behaviors out with obviously an employer. How are you, get up and dress in the morning? How would you operate? What would your behaviors look like? A channel that looks at how you operate within a work context, your current work context. And then the one that's really interesting is behaviors under pressure. How do you respond when the pressure comes on? So there's that, and I do a lot of EQ, sort of emotional intelligence work as well with people, because I think that's probably been the most significant change at boardroom level, is having that ability to understand, regulate, and execute kind of emotional capability in yourself and others around you. And boards have got so much more transparency now. So yeah, you get found out pretty quickly these days
Yeah.
if you haven't got people at the center. And a lot of EQ is all around people and how you engage in win-win situations and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's part of it. I have the ability to build trust and rapport very quickly. And again, working with those senior executives, they are time poor. So you've got to get stuck in. And as I said earlier on, in the kind of the session, getting to the nub of things really quickly is definitely a skill, and working with a whole range of people. Generally, I can find something in common with everyone. And if you can do that, then people trust you. And even some of the things that I've shared today, if it's appropriate, it's not for everyone. If it's appropriate and you share that, the power of when someone says, me too, me too, and it just opens up a whole new narrative, and you really get underneath the skin in terms of what's really going on.
Yeah.
There's all the bravado at the front. Oh, I'm CEO, or I'm VP, and I've done this well, and this is all. Yeah, okay. So why are we having the conversation? Why are you stuck? Why can't you move on? If you could do this yourself, obviously we wouldn't be having that conversation. So let's really get down to the nitty gritty. And I always, I kind of pre-qualify my clients as well. And there are people that I say, I don't think I'm the coach for you. I want people that are willing to put the work in. Us, it's just a waste of time, effort, and money. So if you're hungry, you have a vision, or even if you don't have a vision, because we can work on that together. That's a good recipe and a good chemistry for a good coach, mentor, advisor, and client relationship.
Yeah. Fantastic. Simon, I think it's a passionate, powerful story, and how your understanding of faith for you highlights so many things that I've genuinely took away from this conversation as well. I know I have bravado, and it's funny because I did a podcast with somebody who has a different point of view on the profiling, the psychological profiling, and the personality profiling. And I think he mentioned that, was it the Higgs and Boson, or the Higgs and Bracket, or something like that?
Yeah, I've kind of heard of that. I don't know much
Yeah,
about
and
that.
he always comments and says that was just based on horoscopes. He went something years ago. He went, and they still use it now in big businesses. He went, it's mental that they're still using that, to be fair. And disc, I remember disc an awful lot. And I've had quite a few conversations. Where was I on the disc, Simon?
I think there's definitely a D there.
You think? I actually really what I was. I think I've gone more into D now, driver, to be
There's
fair.
definitely there's definitely influence. I mean, I can see
Yeah,
obviously the BNI chapter that you introduced me to, and I came along. I could see you work in the room, and even your presentation at the moment, you've got gravitas, and I can see that
yeah,
from the beginning. You know, you're someone that's kind of bold, extrovert,
yeah.
commands the space in a room, and that's one of your superpowers. So it was great to see that kind of on display.
But when anybody's talking analytics and like, I need more information, I'm like, just I zone out. I genuinely struggle with the thinkers, and I'm like, oh, it's I do the analyzers and the thinkers. I'm like, oh my god, no. But it all comes down to the way that we see things and how we believe things and things like that. And I just think fail fast and learn quicker. But a
Correct.
lot of people, I know my wife is probably more of a thinker and analytical. And she, well, let's think about this. Let's just, is there anything else? And I'm like, oh no, I zone out. I genuinely zone out. So disc is very, very, very good, to be fair. Very, very powerful for business and things like that. Is there anything else you want to share today, Simon? Because I think this has been a great chat and a great conversation, especially around bad.
Yeah. No, I suppose there's a scripture in the Bible, which is Matthew 5:14. Now, there's various versions of the Bible, and when I left my church in Birmingham that I helped to plant, which was called Gallery Church, um, a very good friend of mine, still a very good friend, and an amazing designer, and just an amazing human being, a guy called Luke Tong. He presented me with this scripture from the Message version, and it simply says, "You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world."
Mm,
And that's what I try and do every day.
the God colors. Love that. You're here to be light to help bring the God colors out. Wow. And if you've got any chats or any words of mentoring for someone who has just been diagnosed with bipolar, what would you say?
Don't isolate yourself. And there's an African proverb that says it is kind of relevant, I think, to that. If you want to go quick, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's really powerful and something I picked up from the Eden Project actually a good long while ago, but it's always stuck in my head. And it's you know that shock that you feel getting diagnosis, and for me it was a bit strange actually, because as soon as I was told that, I said, okay, I can recognize that in myself now, because I have had swings in mood and energy and all the rest of it. So it was almost initially like a relief. But
Yeah,
yeah, just get good advice, personally. Go to the doctor, psychiatrist, all those kind of support areas. If that doesn't work for you, then try something else. But for me personally, that's obviously all I can say from my personal experience, because I that was the choice that I made, and I don't think I would be in such a good as good a state as I am now without that support. So I'm very thankful to everyone in my medical team.
brilliant. Thank you so much. Simon, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing the story. Because I think it's a powerful story, especially with the amount of diagnosis for BPD and BAD now as well. I think it's a powerful conversation for people to listen to. And I
And
think
thank you as well, Cuddy, for having me on. It's very gracious of you. So thank you.
it's a pleasure. It genuinely is a pleasure. And a lot of the podcast guests I have on, I have them on so that they can change my mindset towards things and my belief system. Because we get stuck in a narrative and we get stuck in a perception of what things are. And I do quote that an awful lot for clients that I'm working with, that because I think it does become part of identity. And it has for you, Simon, but you've managed your identity the way that you want to manage it for the reasons you managed it for your son.
Yeah.
And I would do nothing but commend absolutely everybody for that. But if someone's walking around going, have I, do I, don't I, then I would say go and see a doctor and then have a look for the other options out there. And if there's anything anyone takes away from this podcast is you can manage it. And if it's in the mind, it can be managed.
Absolutely.
And
Well,
on that bombshell, we'll say a massive thank you. And if you enjoyed this podcast, by all means, like and subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll see all the podcasts that's coming up with the Mind Management Mentors podcast. Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure.
God bless you, Cuddy.
I hope he does sometimes. I'm not particularly religious, but I think he has done sometimes. Big love from Cuddy, and we'll see you in the next episode.